Welcome to Mr. Dread. This is where every story drags you a little deeper into the dark. If this is your first night here, make sure you subscribe and tap the bell icon, because what you're about to hear isn't a campfire tale, it's a confession. Tell me which part of the world you're listening from down in the comments, and maybe I'll send you a greeting in the next upload. Now, turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and remember, in these woods, even the trees are listening. I used to laugh when tourists asked if the forest was haunted. 12 years as a park ranger had taught me that people fear what they don't understand, and a forest at night is pure misunderstanding. But after what happened last fall, I stopped laughing. That night began with the storm. Rain slammed against the tin roof of the Ridgeline Ranger Station so hard the walls trembled with every gust. Lightning rolled through the mountains like slow flashbangs. My shift was almost over. One more hour and I could have gone home, poured a drink, maybe even slept. Then the distress call came through the radio. Hey, anyone out there? This is... hello? We need help, but... Ridgeline Trail, he's gone. The rest drowned in thunder. I froze. Missing person calls weren't rare, but there was something in that voice. A kind of panic that wasn't just fear of being lost. It was fear of being found. I grabbed my jacket, flashlight, and the keys to the old park truck. Tires hissed through puddles as I drove the dirt road toward the Ridgeline trailhead. The radio spat static. When I switched to Channel 9, a whisper slid through. "Don't look for him." I killed the volume. Probably crosstalk, I told myself. Maybe another tower. By the time I reached the trailhead, fog had swallowed everything. The rain had slowed down, but it clung to the world like a heavy curtain. My boots sank in mud with every step. 2 tents sat half-collapsed under the pines, flashlights scattered, beams pointing in every direction. The campsite looked paused, as if whoever had been there had just stepped out of existence. "Park Ranger! Anyone here?" Only wind answered. Then I heard it, a wet, rhythmic sound. Not thunder, not rain, breathing. My flashlight found footprints, 2 pairs of boots, and one more set bare, narrow, toes too long, pressing deep into the earth. They led away from the camp, vanishing into the tree line where the ground turned to moss. The ranger manual says never to track alone at night in fog this thick. I went anyway. The woods felt different that night. Too still. My footsteps echoed back half beat too late, like someone else was walking behind me, just out of sync. My flashlight flickered. I smacked it twice, and the beam steadied again, landing on a shape in the distance. A small cabin. There wasn't supposed to be a cabin there. Every structure in the park was mapped, dated, logged. I'd memorized them all. This one wasn't on any map. Its boards were gray and slick with rot, roof sagging under moss. A thin metal pipe jutted from the top, puffing faint smoke that smelled wrong. Not wood smoke, chemical, bitter. The door hung open just enough to creak in the wind. Inside was a single wooden chair facing the corner. On the table beside it, a ranger badge lay half buried in ash. When I brushed it clean, I froze. H. Graham, 1979. My father's name. He'd vanished on patrol the year before I was born. The radio in my hand crackled. Eli. That was my name. Don't stay after dark. My throat tightened. I stepped out fast, scanning the trees. Nothing but fog and the hiss of drizzle on pine needles. Then I heard it music. Faint, drifting through the woods. A lullaby. No lyrics, just a tune hummed by something that didn't need to breathe. I followed the sound, not sure why, only that I couldn't stop. The forest opened onto the edge of Ridgeline Lake. Lightning flashed, turning the surface into a perfect black mirror. And at its edge stood 3 figures. 2 wore hiking jackets. The third was tall, thin, and pale, skin the color of bone under the lightning. Then the light vanished. And so did they. Only the ripples remained. Rain whispered against the lake as the ripples faded. I stood there breathing hard, flashlight shaking in my hand. Every instinct screamed to go back to the truck, call for backup, and report the missing campers and leave it at that. But something about that badge, about hearing my name on the radio, wouldn't let me leave. When the lightning flared again, I saw tracks leading away from the waterline. Not boot prints this time, bare feet again, deep enough to fill with rain. The prints went uphill towards an old service path I hadn't used in years. I followed. Branches clawed at my jacket. The air smelled of wet soil and rust. As I climbed, the radio hissed again. No voice, just a low hum, like breathing through static. Then words pushed through. "Eli, find me." The sound came from both the radio and the trees. I turned in every direction, beam cutting through the fog, catching faces in the bark, knots shaped like eyes and mouths frozen mid-scream. I told myself it was pareidolia, the mind making patterns from chaos. But one of the eyes blinked. I stumbled back, tripped on a root, landed hard on my elbow. The flashlight went flying. When I grabbed it, the beam swept across something carved into a tree trunk. He never left. It looked fresh. The edges of the letter still oozed sap like blood. The path leveled out ahead, opening into a small clearing I didn't recognize. At the center was an old Ranger truck, one of the models retired decades ago, half swallowed by moss. The windows were fogged from the inside. I wiped the glass. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. A man in uniform, hat low, hands on the wheel, no movement. I yanked open the door. The hinges screamed. The figure fell sideways. Hollow uniform, no body, just air and dust. The name patch read, H. Graham. I reeled back, bile rising in my throat. My father's badge, now his uniform. Something was piecing itself together out here, something that remembered his name and mine. The smell of that strange smoke thickened. I turned toward it and saw through the trees another column rising. The cabin smoke. I'd circled back somehow, though I'd been walking straight. When I stepped inside, the chair was no longer empty. A small lantern glowed on the table, flickering yellow against the walls. In the chair sat a boy, mud-caked, shivering, maybe 10 years old. His eyes were wide, black in the light. "Where's your family?" I asked. He stared at me for a long moment before answering. "They followed the man with no face." I crouched down. "Who's that man?" He pointed towards the door. "He said he could take them home." "Home where?" The boy didn't blink. "Under the lake." I felt my pulse climb into my throat. I tried the radio again. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Eli Ward. I have a missing child found near Ridgeline Lake, requesting immediate assistance." Static. Then laughter. Not a child's laughter, deeper, wet, like something bubbling up through water. The boy covered his ears. "He's coming!" Outside, the wind roared. The door slammed shut on its own, rattling the cabin. The lantern dimmed. The smell of smoke turned to rot. A shape moved beyond the window, tall, impossibly thin, gliding instead of walking. Every flash of lightning etched it clearer. A figure made of fog and water, head smooth where a face should be. The boy whispered, "He takes the ones who look." Too late. The window exploded inward, spraying shards and rain. I threw myself over the boy. The wind sucked the light out of the lantern. In that brief moment of darkness, something cold brushed the back of my neck. A voice whispered through the storm, "Welcome back, Eli." Then silence. When I opened my eyes, it was morning again. The cabin was empty. No boy, no footprints. The only sign anyone had been there was the badge on the table and a wet handprint beside it. I staggered outside. The forest was bright and quiet, birds singing like nothing had happened. I drove straight back to the station, filed a half-truth report, possible lost campers, evidence of child presence, no confirmed victims, and locked myself in the break room until shift change. But that wasn't the end. That night, I dreamed of the lake. The surface was glass again. Beneath it, I saw faces, too many to count, watching, open-mouthed, eyes wide in the dark water. One of them was mine. When I woke, the smell of that smoke was in my room. I lay there for a long time, pretending not to breathe. The rain had stopped, but the sound of dripping didn't. Slow, steady, from the corner of the ceiling. I turned my head toward it. The ceiling wasn't leaking. The sound was inside the room. Something wet slid down the wall. At first I thought it was condensation from the window. Then the smell hit me. Lake water. Thick and metallic. I followed the sound to the baseboard and saw a trail of moisture, leading straight to the door. When I bent down, I could see tiny footprints pressed into the carpet, each one filling slowly with dark water. The kid. I yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, except for a faint mist creeping along the floor. My heart hammered as I followed the trail down to the ranger office. The light over the duty desk flickered like a heartbeat. The smell of smoke and wet moss grew stronger. The radio on the desk was on. I hadn't turned it on. Eli? The voice was clearer this time. Not my father's. Not the boy's. Something in between, like both speaking from the same throat. Why did you leave him there? My skin went cold. Who is this? Silence. Then, faintly, you were supposed to stay after dark. The radio went dead. I slammed it off and backed away. Outside the window, lightning flashed over the tree line, and for a split second, I saw the shape of the cabin, right there, less than 50 yards from the station. When the light faded, it was gone again. That's when I decided to call in backup. I reached the main ranger dispatch line, tried to explain the missing persons, the abandoned camp, the child, the strange structure. The woman on the other end paused longer than was normal. "Ridgeline Trail?" she finally said. "Sir, that sector's closed since 1983. Fire damage. There's nothing there." I stared at the radio. "Ma'am, I was there last night. There's a cabin, a truck, evidence." "Sir," she interrupted, voice flat, "there are no recorded structures within 10 miles of that trail. If you're feeling unwell, I can send a replacement ranger." I hung up. The world outside the windows was gray again. Clouds piling in from the north. Another storm coming. The forest looked soaked and heavy, its branches bending toward the ground like they were listening. I told myself I'd check the area one more time, just enough to prove to myself that the night before had been some kind of hallucination. I packed gear, loaded the truck, and drove out before I could change my mind. The dirt road seemed shorter in daylight. Too short. When I reached the turnoff, the tire ruts from last night were gone, like the forest had swallowed them. I parked, stepped out, and the air went instantly colder. Even the insects were silent. Halfway down the trail, I found the tents again. Same position, same collapsed poles. But this time, they looked ancient. Canvas stiff with mildew, lanterns rusted, a notebook half buried in the soil. I picked it up carefully. Inside were entries written in pencil, the words faint and warped by moisture. July 14th. Graham says we should head back soon. Something's wrong with the lake. July 15th. Heard a boy singing last night. Sounded close, but when I checked, no one was there. July 16th. He's in the water. He keeps calling our names. The final page was blank, except for a single, smeared word. Eli. I dropped the notebook. The sound of water lapping against shore drifted through the trees. I wasn't anywhere near the lake, yet I could hear it. Soft, rhythmic, like something breathing through the forest floor. The clouds darkened fast. Rain began to fall again. Heavier, colder. I jogged back toward the truck. The path curved wrong. It twisted in a direction it hadn't before. When I stopped to get my bearings, the forest didn't match my memory at all. The smell of smoke rolled in again. Ahead, between two leaning pines, the cabin waited. This time, I didn't go in. I walked a slow circle around it instead, shining my light through the broken boards. Inside, the chair was gone. The table was gone. Only the lantern remained, glowing faintly. The badge on the table had been replaced by something else. A photograph. I lifted it through the gap in the boards. It was me, sitting in this very clearing, flashlight in hand, staring at the cabin. The picture had been taken from behind my shoulder. Lightning flared again, and for an instant, a shadow passed across the doorway. A tall, faceless figure bending low, almost brushing the frame. The next thunderclap knocked the breath out of me. I ran. Branches whipped my face, tore at my jacket. I didn't stop until I saw the gleam of the truck's metal through the trees. I jumped inside, slammed the door, jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine coughed once and died. The radio came on by itself. "You can't leave, Eli. There's still one missing." A whisper from the back seat. "Help me." I turned slowly. Nothing there. Then the windshield fogged up from the inside. On the glass, a single word traced itself, letter by trembling letter. "Stay." I threw the door open, stumbled into the rain, and ran down the road on foot, not stopping until the ranger station came into view. Lights were on. I could see movement inside, someone pacing. When I burst through the door, I froze. It was me, standing by the desk, writing in the logbook. The other me looked up, eyes black as the boy's, and smiled. "You made it back." The figure standing at the desk didn't move when I stepped inside. Same boots, same jacket, same cut above the eyebrow from last night's fall. Only the eyes were different, flat black, the kind of black that eats the light around it. He smiled again, still facing me. "You finally caught up," he said. The voice was mine, but dragged through gravel. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. The only sound that came out was the rain ticking against the windows. He turned the logbook toward me. The pages were blank, except for one sentence written over and over. "You stayed after dark." I took a step closer. The air between us felt thick, heavy with the same smell of the lake, iron and cold algae. My hand brushed the badge on my chest, just to be sure I was still solid. "What are you?" I managed. The other me tilted his head. "I'm what you were supposed to be." He closed the logbook, tapped it once, and the lights flickered out. When they came back, he was gone. The only thing left on the desk was the photograph, the one of me at the cabin. But this time, the background had changed. Behind me, in the picture, I could see the ranger station burning. I backed away from the desk. The walls groaned, wood expanding under invisible pressure.
Somewhere outside, a tree cracked in half. That's when the phone rang. A landline, ancient, hanging on the wall beside the window. No one used it anymore. The park system had gone fully radio years ago. It rang 3 times before I forced myself to answer. "Ridgeline Station," I said, my voice barely steady. On the other end, a child whispered, "He's in your reflection." The line went dead. I turned toward the window. Rainwater streamed down the glass, turning it into a sheet of moving light. My own face looked back at me, pale, shaking, and just behind my reflection, another shadow leaned in. Taller, faceless, standing exactly where my double had been. The room plunged into darkness. When I woke, it was morning again. Sunlight through the blinds, coffee smell from the break room. For a few seconds, it almost felt normal. I half laughed, convinced I'd dreamed the whole thing. Until I looked down. The floor was covered in damp footprints. I followed them to the door. Outside, mist rolled off the trees like breath. A single trail of prints led down toward the road, each step darker, wetter, until they vanished into the soil. At the end of the trail lay a ranger's hat, soaked through. The tag inside read, H. Graham. My father's hat. I carried it back to the truck and set it on the passenger seat.
I didn't start the engine, just sat there listening to the forest breathe. The station behind me groaned once, like the building itself exhaled. Then silence. I should have driven straight out of the park, left everything behind, but part of me couldn't. There was something unfinished in the air, a pull dragging me back toward the lake. Maybe it was the smell, maybe it was that word on the window. Stay. So I did. The trail was muddy from the night's rain, the air thick with fog. Each step forward sounded like walking on lungs, soft, wet, unwilling. By the time I reached the clearing where the cabin should have been, there was nothing but black water stretching out where land used to be. The lake had risen, swallowing the trees at its edge. Only the top of the chimney stuck out of the surface, coughing smoke that melted into the mist. I stood there for what felt like hours, watching ripples spread across the water's skin. Every so often, something beneath would move, just enough to remind me that the surface wasn't empty. And then, through the static of the radio on my shoulder, a familiar voice. "Eli, report in." Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. "This is Ranger Ward. I'm at Ridgeline Lake. The cabin's underwater. I need—" "Copy that," the voice cut in. "We're sending a team. Stay where you are." Static swallowed the rest, but I didn't care. Backup was coming, finally. Minutes passed, then hours. The forest grew quiet again. No birds, no wind, only the steady pulse of rain hitting water. When the first flashlight beam appeared between the trees, I waved both arms and shouted. It wasn't a ranger. It was me. The figures stepped out of the fog. Same uniform, same soaked hat. He smiled, and in that flat, dead voice said, "You called for help?" The rain had stopped, but the forest hadn't gone silent. It was breathing, the kind of slow, low hum that crawls through the dirt and into your bones. I remember standing by the ranger tower, my flashlight trembling in my hand, the beam cutting through the mist like a knife through fog. Somewhere below me, down the slope near the marsh, something moved. Slow, careful, like it didn't want to be found. I radioed the base again. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Daniel. I'm still tracking the missing hiker. I've reached the North Marsh Trail. Coordinates." But the static swallowed the rest of my words. The radio hissed and then clicked off by itself. I tried again. Nothing. And then, for the first time since I started this search, I felt it. The eyes, watching me. Not from the trees, but from beneath them. Something was crawling there, behind the ferns. I saw the grass moving in a line, like a snake slithering through. I backed up slowly, my boots crunching on the gravel. That's when I noticed the footprints, bare, wet, human, leading away from the tower and disappearing into the woods. Fresh, just a few minutes old, and that smell again. Rotten leaves, burned wood, and something metallic, like old blood. I followed the tracks. Every step felt heavier. The air got colder the deeper I went, until I could see my breath fogging in front of me, even though it was mid-June. The forest felt wrong, twisted. The same trees I had passed before were somehow closer, bending in, watching. After 20 minutes, I reached a clearing. There was a small cabin I hadn't seen on the maps, wood almost black with rot, moss covering its roof, and that smoke extractor pipe you'd see on old logging shacks. Smoke still puffed from it. Faint, thin, like something was alive inside. I whispered into the dark. "Hello? U.S. Forest Service? If anyone's inside, call out." No answer. But the smoke changed direction. It pulled back into the pipe, as if inhaled. Then the front door opened a crack, and a voice said, "You shouldn't have come here." The flashlight flickered. My body froze. That voice wasn't human. It echoed like a whisper played backward through a radio. I stepped closer, pushing the door open with the barrel of my rifle. Inside, it was darker than night. The walls were covered in maps, hand-drawn, all showing the same park, but with trails that didn't exist. Trails leading deep underground. Trails that connected to nothing. Trails that circled the tower I came from and stopped right where I was standing. And in the middle of the cabin was a chair. A ranger's uniform was hanging on it. The name tag said, D. Morgan. My own name. Then something moved behind the chair. A man. No, something wearing a man's shape stepped forward. His face was blurred, like fog trapped behind glass. His mouth was open, but instead of breath, smoke poured out. He looked at me, and I saw my reflection in his eyes, standing right where he stood. Then he whispered, "I told them not to send another one." The floor beneath me creaked. Then it broke. I fell, down through a hollow tunnel, landing on wet soil. My flashlight shattered, leaving only a dim glow from my backup lamp. The smell down there was unbearable. Rot, oil, and the faint sweetness of decaying fruit. I could hear whispering, dozens of voices coming from the walls. When I turned, I saw shapes carved into the dirt, faces twisted in silent screams. I began crawling forward through the narrow passage. Every few feet, I saw flashes of metal embedded in the mud. Ranger badges, some so old they'd turned green. And then I found a radio, half buried, still crackling faintly. Through it, I heard my own voice. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Daniel. I'm still tracking the missing hiker. I've reached the North Marsh Trail. Coordinates." Then static. Then, "You're next." I threw the radio. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely breathe. There was light up ahead, orange, flickering. I followed it, crawling faster until I reached another opening. Inside was a cavern, massive and deep. In the center stood a circle of stone, and in that circle, bodies, dozens of them, all wearing ranger uniforms. And on the wall behind them, written in ash, the words, "The forest takes care of its own." Something moved among the bodies, slow, heavy. I raised my lamp just in time to see a face rise from the pile, half decomposed, eyes white and gleaming. It smiled and said, "Welcome back, Ranger." The light went out.
When I came to, I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed. It was that dark. The air was thick and damp, tasting like old coins and wet bark. Every breath echoed. My ribs ached from the fall, and something warm was trickling down the side of my head. For a moment I thought maybe I was dead, that I'd landed too hard and my brain was just firing off dying memories. But then I heard it. The slow, wet shuffle of something dragging itself across the dirt. Close. I reached for my flashlight, forgetting it had shattered in the fall. My fingers brushed something cold, the backup lamp. It flickered once, then came to life with a weak yellow glow. The beam fell across the tunnel walls. Roots. Hundreds of them. But they weren't hanging. They were breathing, pulsing softly, like veins under skin. And in some places, I swear I saw faces pressed into them, mouths open as if screaming, eyes closed like they were sleeping. I started crawling forward. Every sound echoed back at me 3 times, like the earth itself was mocking me. The tunnel split into 2 paths. One sloped upward, faint light at the end. The other curved down into complete blackness. That's when I saw something carved into the dirt between the 2 paths. A message, fresh, scratched by hand. "Don't go toward the light." I froze. The dirt was still loose, like whoever wrote it had just finished seconds ago. But there was no sound, no breathing, nothing. I stayed there, flashlight trembling, thinking about the man or thing in the cabin. His voice, the smoke coming out of his mouth, and the way he said, "I told them not to send another one." I took the darker path. The deeper I went, the more the air began to change. It wasn't just damp anymore. It was alive. I could feel it moving over my skin like invisible insects. The smell of rot grew stronger, and every few minutes I heard whispers, not from ahead, from inside the walls. At one point, the tunnel widened into a circular chamber. In the middle was an old park sign, rusted, almost eaten by moss. It said, "Welcome to Blackwood National Park." But the park's name had been painted over years ago. The one I worked in wasn't called Blackwood. That's when it hit me. The maps. The cabin walls covered in them, with trails that didn't exist, trails that led to places like this.
I crouched beside the sign, brushing the dirt away. There were dozens of tally marks carved into the post. I counted them, 39. And below that, scratched into the metal, Ranger's Scent. Before I could process that, something tapped my shoulder. Once. Then again. I turned around. Nothing. Just roots. Then the tapping came again, harder this time from above. I aimed the light upward. A ranger's hat hanging from a root. Then another. And another. A whole ceiling full of them, swaying gently as if moved by wind that didn't exist. One of them fell, landing at my feet. The name stitched inside read M. Torres. She'd gone missing 3 years ago. I'd read her report. My hands started shaking. I backed up and bumped into something solid. I turned and saw a man standing there, uniform torn, face pale, eyes blank. His mouth opened, but his jaw unhinged wider than humanly possible, and a low, wet voice came out. "Don't go toward the light." He lunged. I dropped the lamp and ran blindly through the tunnel. The sound of scraping metal echoed behind me, like a dozen boots dragging against rock. When I finally saw a faint glow ahead, I didn't care what it was. I just ran toward it. The tunnel opened up into a massive underground chamber. Roots covered the walls like veins. In the center was a single tree, dead, black, and bleeding sap that glowed faintly red. All around it were shapes, human shapes, rangers, hikers, people. They were wrapped in roots, not dead, not alive, their eyes open and twitching like they were dreaming. And then I saw myself.
Another Daniel. Same uniform, same cut on his head, same trembling hand. But his eyes were missing. Just 2 black holes. He was mouthing words silently. I stepped closer to read his lips. He was saying, "Don't wake the forest." Then the ground beneath the tree started moving. The ground shuddered beneath my boots. The air thickened, humming like something electrical was running deep under the dirt. The black tree in front of me, the one bleeding that faint red sap, wasn't a tree at all. The bark was moving, slowly, breathing. And then I saw it. Faces in the wood. Dozens of them, half-formed, half-rotten, their mouths opening and closing like they were trying to speak. Some looked human, some didn't. The glow from the sap brightened, pulsing in rhythm with a deep heartbeat that wasn't mine. Thump, thump, thump. Every time it beat, the roots around the chamber flexed like tendons, and the bodies entangled in them twitched, eyes rolling, fingers spasming, gasping without air. The sound they made was worse than any scream. It was wet, muffled, like crying through mud. I stumbled backward, trying to find the tunnel I'd come from. But it wasn't there anymore. The wall had closed behind me. The thing was trapping me inside. Then the whispering started again, not from the walls this time, but from inside my head. "You found us. You came back." I clutched my temples, trying to drown it out. "Who are you?" I yelled. The glow flared, and through the pulsing sap, I saw something shift deep inside the trunk. A massive black shape, turning slowly, like an eye rolling open. A low voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "We are the forest." The roots surged forward, wrapping around my boots, ensnaring me before I could move. The cold hit instantly, Not like ice, but like every nerve in my body shutting down one by one. I tried to yank free, but the harder I pulled, the deeper the roots dug. Then the voice spoke again, calmer this time. You found us. You came to find what was lost. Now you are found. The roots climbed higher, around my legs, my waist. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving only the glow of that crimson sap illuminating the chamber. Shadows twisted up the walls like smoke. Something began to emerge from the base of the tree, a shape forming from the roots themselves. It looked human at first, then it wasn't. It was wearing a ranger's uniform, my uniform. Its face was blank at first, but as it drew closer, the features filled in, my own face. The other me smiled, and when it spoke, it used my exact voice. They don't let us leave, Daniel. We keep the forest fed. I screamed, shoving against the roots. The other me tilted its head. Every missing person, every ranger, every one of us, we're part of it now. Can't you hear it? It's inside you, too. Then I felt it, something crawling under my skin, moving, like a tiny root pushing its way through my veins. My vision blurred, and the chamber tilted sideways. Through the haze, I saw all the bodies on the walls moving in unison, jerking to the same rhythm as the heartbeat beneath the earth. Thump, thump, thump. The other May stepped closer, lifting a hand toward my face. He said, "Breathe in." Before I could react, he exhaled, and that same black smoke I'd seen in the cabin poured out of his mouth. It swirled toward me, curling like tendrils of ink. When it hit my face, I felt something pierce through my mind, hundreds of voices flooding in all at once. Help us. Don't wake it. It's hungry. I dropped to my knees, clawing at the roots. My nails tore off. My breath came out in chokes. Somewhere in the chaos, I heard a faint static, a radio signal cutting through the noise. Ranger Daniel, do you copy? We've lost your signal. Respond if you can. My heart leapt. Dispatch. They were still trying to reach me. I yanked my radio free from my belt, the one I thought had broken, and screamed into it. Help me! I'm underground, under the cabin near the North Marsh, the forest. The radio screeched. Then I heard my own voice reply, Copy that, Daniel. Stay where you are. We're coming to get you. The static cleared for a second, and then the voice added, Welcome home. I froze. The other me was gone. The radio in my hand melted into a root, wrapping around my wrist like a shackle. The chamber began to quake again, harder than before, dust falling from the ceiling like rain. The faces in the wood all opened their mouths at once, releasing a deafening moan that shook the ground. The red sap shot upward, splattering the ceiling and dripping like blood. And through it all, that deep heartbeat grew louder, faster, until it wasn't just sound anymore. It was inside me. Thump, 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 thump. I screamed, but the forest screamed back. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I thought I was dead. Sunlight filtered through pine branches above me, soft and golden, painting everything in warmth that felt wrongly gentle. Birds were chirping. The air smelled like rain and pine needles, clean, fresh, too perfect. I sat up slowly. Every muscle screamed. My head pounded. For a second, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, that I'd fallen, hit my head, hallucinated everything underground. The other me, the breathing roots, the whispering forest, it couldn't be real. But when I looked down the road toward the ranger tower, I saw movement. A figure in uniform walking toward me. It was Chris, my partner. He looked pale but alive, relief washing over his face when he saw me. "Jesus, Dan, we've been looking for you for 2 days. You just vanished off the trail. What the hell happened?" I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. "I fell. The ground gave way under the cabin. There's something under there, something alive." He frowned, glancing toward the forest. "We checked that cabin, man. It's gone. Burned down years ago." I froze. "That's impossible. I was in it." He shook his head. "There's nothing there but an old foundation and a pile of ash. You must have hit your head pretty hard." But I knew he was wrong. My fingers dug into the dirt beside me, and I felt something small and metallic buried there. I pulled it free. A badge. Tarnished. Bent. The name barely legible. M. Torres. My stomach turned. I slipped it quietly into my pocket before Chris could see. We made our way back to the ranger station in silence. The forest looked normal, too normal. Every tree stood perfectly still, every sound exactly where it should be. Yet as we walked, I kept hearing faint rustles behind us. When I turned, nothing was there. Inside the station, I cleaned up and reported everything I could remember, except for the underground part. The captain looked at me like I was in shock and told me to take mandatory leave, said I'd been missing 48 hours and they were lucky to find me at all. But that night, as I tried to sleep in my cabin, the forest started whispering again. Soft, almost kind. "Welcome home, Ranger." I bolted upright, heart hammering. My cabin window looked out onto the tree line. For a moment I thought I saw a figure standing there, my own silhouette reflected back at me, smiling. Then it was gone.
The whisper came again, closer this time. "Don't go toward the light." I slammed the window shut and backed away. The mark on my wrist burned red hot, throbbing with every beat of my heart. Then my radio crackled to life on the nightstand, even though it had been dead since I got back. Static filled the room. Then a voice, my voice, came through. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Daniel. I'm still tracking the missing hiker." The same transmission, the same words. I yanked the power cord out, but the static didn't stop. The radio whispered, "You never left, Daniel." The lights flickered. Outside, the forest sighed, long and low, like something enormous exhaling. The trees swayed, though there was no wind. Then, in the reflection of the dark window, I saw it, a shape moving just behind me, a man in uniform, same build, same hair, same face. Me! He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Breathe in." I spun around. Nothing. But when I looked down, the floor was wet. Black sap was seeping up through the boards, spreading slowly toward my boots. The forest wasn't done with me. You're listening to Mr. Dread, and if the forest hasn't swallowed you yet, you're halfway through tonight's story. If you're brave enough to keep walking deeper with me, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss the next tale that crawls out of the dark. Now take a breath, because this next part gets worse. When the whispering stopped, the silence that followed was even louder. My cabin window still dripped with the black sap. The radio sat on the floor, dead again, but the echo of my own voice replayed in my head. I needed to leave the park. By dawn, I had packed what I could. A flashlight, a map, my truck keys, and the badge I'd found underground. The mark on my wrist had swollen overnight, pulsing beneath the skin, the veins branching outward like tiny roots. I didn't bother signing out. I just climbed into the Ranger pickup and drove. The forest road wound through the valley in slow bends, the morning fog curling low across the asphalt. I kept my eyes on the trees, every trunk a silent witness. The deeper I drove, the thicker the mist became, until the sun itself disappeared behind a curtain of gray. After 20 minutes, I reached the fork that led out of the park. The same fork I'd driven 100 times before. I took the left road, the one that should have taken me toward the highway. But 5 minutes later, the sign reappeared. "Welcome to Blackwood National Park." I hit the brakes. My hands were shaking. I turned the truck around, taking the opposite direction this time, drove faster. The road twisted through the trees, turned once, twice, and then the same sign appeared again. I slammed the steering wheel. No, no, no! The road wasn't taking me anywhere. It was folding in on itself like a loop. Every mile I drove only dragged me back to the same spot. The forest was keeping me here. I got out of the truck, breathing hard, trying to orient myself with the map. But when I unfolded it, the roads had changed. The trail lines were moving, redrawing themselves as I stared. The ranger station was gone. The only word left printed at the center was home. Then I heard the engine turn over behind me. The truck door slammed on its own, and the headlights flared to life. The driver's seat wasn't empty anymore. Someone was sitting there. Someone wearing my face. He smiled through the windshield. Then the horn blared. I stumbled backward, tripping into the ditch. When I looked up again, the truck was gone, vanished into the fog, the sound of the engine fading into the trees. That's when the forest began to move. Not the branches, the entire tree line. The trunks tilted slightly, repositioning themselves with groaning wood and snapping roots. They were forming a corridor, a path that led deeper into the woods. And at the end of that path, through the mist, I saw a light, a soft, golden flicker, like a lantern. Every instinct screamed at me not to go, but my legs didn't listen. I stepped onto the path, drawn forward as if something invisible was tugging me by the wrist. The deeper I went, the more the forest closed behind me, sealing off the way back. The light led me to a clearing I didn't recognize. In the center stood a fire pit, freshly burning. Around it were ranger uniforms, 30, maybe 40, all hung neatly on branches, like offerings. And sitting by the fire was a child, barefoot, hair matted with leaves, eyes black as the sap. She smiled when she saw me. "You finally came back," she said. "Back from where?" I asked, my voice shaking. She pointed to my chest. "You were always part of it. You just forgot." I stepped closer, and that's when I saw it. The mark on her wrist, the same as mine. The same pulsing roots under the skin. "Who are you?" I whispered. She smiled wider, teeth too sharp, too many. "I'm the first ranger they took." Then she reached into the fire and pulled something out, unburned, untouched by the flames. A photograph. Old, color faded. It was me, standing by the Ranger Tower, but behind me, in the photo, the forest wasn't still. The trees had faces. The child's eyes rolled white, the ground trembled, and the forest whispered again, not in one voice, but in hundreds. "Stay!" I turned to run, but the path was gone. Only trees, endless, whispering trees. If you've ever felt like a place remembers you, maybe it's because it's not done with you yet. The forest didn't end. No matter how many steps I took, the clearing stayed the same distance behind me, the same trees ahead. It was like walking through a loop of living wood. The child's voice echoed from every direction. "You forgot what you did, Ranger Daniel." My hands were shaking. "What are you talking about?" She giggled, a sound too old for her face. "You weren't the first to hear them. You were the one who answered." I pressed my palms against my ears, trying to drown her out. But her voice wasn't in the air anymore. It was inside me. Flashes started hitting my mind, images I couldn't place. Me and the old Chief Ranger digging in the woods, the sound of crying from under the soil, the chief whispering, "We feed it, or it feeds on us." I dropped to my knees. My flashlight flickered completely. The dark swallowed me whole. Then I saw it. Half buried in the soil nearby was a mound, a small, uneven hill with ranger badges pressed into the dirt, like gravestones. The air stank of wet rot and iron. My boots sank deeper with every step I took towards it. When I reached out to touch the mound, something beneath it moved. I jumped back. The earth shifted, cracking open just enough to show pale skin. A hand, old and bloated, clutching at the surface. Then another. Then another. Dozens of them clawing from underneath, as if the forest floor itself was trying to crawl free. I screamed and ran, but every direction led me back to the same place. The mound, the badges, the smell. The whispers grew louder. Now they were all saying the same thing, overlapping in 1,000 broken voices. "You're one of us."
You fed it. You belong here. My flashlight died completely. The dark swallowed me whole. Then, silence. Only my heart beat, until something exhaled behind me. Warm, damp air hit my neck. I turned slowly. There, standing no more than a few feet away, was the other me. The same ranger uniform, same face, but his eyes, they were hollow. Sap leaked from his mouth when he smiled. He reached out his hand. "We've been waiting, Daniel." I stepped back. "You're not real." He tilted his head. "Neither are you." Before I could move, the ground beneath us opened, swallowing everything in a roar of snapping roots and screaming soil. The last thing I saw was his face merging with mine, the sap pouring over my eyes like black rain. Then, nothing. They never found Ranger Daniel. Just his badge nailed to the same tree where the whispers began.
Some nights, hikers say they still hear him calling over the radio, asking for directions out of the park he can't leave. They searched for 3 days, the rangers, the dogs, the drones. All they found were echoes, and a trail that ended where the forest began. 2 weeks later, a new ranger took my post. They told him not to go too deep at night, that some areas were still unstable. He didn't listen. On his 3rd shift, his body cam recorded something the station never released to the public. Only a few of us heard it before it was locked away. The footage showed him walking along the same ridge I once patrolled. Fog everywhere, his breathing loud, fast. Then a voice came through the radio, cutting through the static. This is Ranger Daniel, reporting in. I can't find the trail. The young ranger froze. Who is this? I just need directions out. You could hear the desperation, the wet rasp of someone who hadn't spoken in years. The camera jerked toward the trees. And there, in the reflection of his flashlight, were 2 eyes glowing faintly through the mist. They were mine. The camera dropped, the feed cut to black. When the rescue team arrived, all they found was his radio, still crackling with the same words, looping endlessly. Can you hear me? I can't find the trail. Some say the forest took him. Some say the forest made him. But the old rangers, they whisper that it just keeps calling new names. If you've made it this far into the dark tonight, welcome to the Dread. My name is Mr. Dread, and this was only the beginning. Before you vanish into the shadows, make sure you subscribe to Mr. Dread and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story from the woods. And now, tell me in the comments which part of the world are you watching this from. I'll send a dark greeting your way in my next upload. The